Alrighty, so for these first three items on Monday, we're jumping into our next big, as I've already talked about, Bootstrap and the attendance. So I'm not going to go over that. What I want to talk about is how to set up your folder and files for this particular one. And I say this because I just walked through doing both of these and I ran into a little bit of an issue with the images. So I just want to give you the heads up on that. And then talk about some of the key things that I think, actually, it's back here, that I really want to make sure, because many of you have not been exposed to some of the terms that he's going to use here. And I want to talk about them just for a moment. And one is breakpoints and one's SVG files. Now, if you know anything about files, and we'll start with the last one, is that um, anything about image files, right? Most image files are either what we call raster or pixel based, or they're vector based. And these files that we're going to use for this project are vector based. And he's going to give them to you out on his GitHub site. And I'm going to show you how I got it to work. And I recommend you doing it the same way. So I'll show you that. And then he's also going to talk about breakpoints. And so this is a really, matter of fact, I have the what we ended up doing here. This is the site that you end up creating. And understanding breakpoints is understanding the idea that is responsive design. So responsive design says that you build a site that responds to different, what we might term viewports. And viewports is what you're viewing it through. It's something, if you remember, up in the head section part of the HTML we looked at. One thing you can do that really can help here is there's a couple things. If you right click into inspect, and under inspect, DevTools gives you an option here. And it actually, it's here, that's responsive, but you can look at it on all these different types of devices, so you can kind of see it through that viewport, right? Not kind of, you are seeing it through that viewport. And so in this case, it's a little hard to see what we call the breakpoints, and breakpoints are done via media queries. Okay, and you're going to learn, you're going to actually write media queries, but in this case, you're going to lean upon Bootstrap to handle those media queries by adding classes. Okay, let me actually show you that. So first, I just wanted to show you that here in inspect and DevTools, you can change that. There is a responsive, and this is where you can just grab this. And what happens is, as your viewport, or as you can think of it, your browser expands, the web page has a different logic of rendering, and that is based on those media queries. Okay. And so when you hit a breakpoint is where it starts to change. So you can see, and there's actually specific pixels that these are rated at, and it's just something over time that you learn about. But as I come down, you notice that the image starts to get smaller. This is something he talks about, and then it goes away, right? So that's when we hit the media query part of Bootstrap that said, hey, at this resolution, drop that out. So I just want to give you that heads up. So if you've never heard of that, you at least have some of that to kind of just contextualize some of the content that he's going to cover. Oh, sorry. Hang on. I have way too many windows open. Hold on. Okay, so now that I got some windows closed, let's actually talk about the setup. So my setup is already done, okay? But actually, let's do this. Before we go into this, let's click into this included um, markdown file that I've given you. And this is, before I show you, really important. I know it's tempting. I just have to tell you, I know it's tempting because you have a link here to the actual final version. And it's very tempting, especially towards the second part that we do on Thursday, to just cut and paste. But I'm just going to tell you, it will hurt your grade because it is very clear to me when I review your commits where you've done that. Mostly because here's what happens is, over time, he ends up adding things into the HTML for the Bootstrap styles. And if you just copy them from the site, I will know it. And so don't do it. And really, it's not what you're here to learn because, anybody can cut and paste. The thing you're trying to here to learn is how to code. Okay. So again, I'm going to open this file because I'm going to have them both open. I'm going to have the instruction file that I gave you because here's your commit messages. And here's the file the link to the bootstrap he gives you. So the thing is, he gives you these images, and these are the SVGs. SVGs, like I said, are vector-based files. Um, and what happens really vector-based wise is it actually just has the instruction for creating these images. And when I first did this, I right clicked and don't do it yet. I did save link as, which I thought would work. But when I got further into the work, I realized that didn't work for whatever reason based on these SVGs. Because basically, even though if I click on it, and that's what I'm going to have you do, I'm going to click, it renders the image. I want you to here right click save image as, and when you do that, you want to navigate. So in this case, I've already done it, but you would navigate to CIT82, navigate to the public. And in this case, this is where I've already created it. You will need to create that bootstrap. I'll show you that in a minute. And then create that images directory. Okay. And for me, because I've already done it once, but make sure you save it, right? As the file name. That way, when he's coding along, it'll make more sense. Okay. So make sure you save it this way. Like I said, I ran into a little bit of an issue and I'm trying to prevent that for you. Okay. So do that for all three files. So let's just look at real quick the image, structure you need to set up here. Let me close this for a minute, make this a little bigger so you can see, and I'm going to increase the size of the font. So what you're doing here is you're creating that subdirectory under lectures called Bootstrap, all lowercase, no space. I do mark off for that because that's the naming standard that I've created for this class. And then here's your images, and there are those files. What's kind of interesting, although I don't really recommend it, so because it may throw the file off a little bit, like if I was just to open that file up, there is just, look at this, all this is instruction for how to create that file. Okay. But what happened was when I clicked into these two, oh, and to see now that I'm doing save as, it actually did it correctly. Okay. So those are the files that you will have. You don't have to worry about all that code in there. All you're going to do is end up putting it in to the file reference when you're creating the output. But I just want to show you how to acquire those and the structure you need to create for this. All right. So the thing I want to also say though is as you're coding this, and I'm going to end up rolling this up. And this is where you can use these carrots inside of VS Code to roll up, collapse and expand. I always think of them as rolling it up. But during this coding, and I'm just going to show you in another file just to give you the idea, he's going to do I mean, we've talked about Emmett now, right? But now you're going to get a deep dive, and watching him do it can be a little frustrating because he does it fairly quickly. So I just want to show you like in this case, if I was going to create a section, right? If I was going to create a section through Emmett, and then I'd do dot, and then I would do like the class name, test1 dot test2. Well, if I hit tab there, it creates the section giving the two classes, right? So very often that's what he's going to do. And what will happen, and I'm going to do undo real quick, is if for some reason I hit tab and nothing happens, that just means my command was not being recognized. And so what you can do is just write it manually. Now it takes a little more time, so probably you want to learn to write it this way, but I just want you to know that as well. And the other thing he doesn't really mention, but is if you just start writing a class, by default it'll create a div because divs are kind of the most common structure, or in this case, block level tags that we use. So I just want you to know in that case, that's what happens if you don't specify which tag you're using. Okay, so that's the kind of heads up I wanted to give you for that work in that case. But make sure you're doing your own coding, and it's really okay to look at the code that he's provided just to see if you've missed something. But if you're tempted to do the cut and paste, just don't, because trust me, as I went through it, I found those places where he went back and updated things, and I will be able to see it. And, like, again, that's not why you're here. Okay, so that's the first item. The second item, and we'll complete this. We're actually not going to complete it. We almost complete it on the Thursday night item, but I'll talk about that in that video. Now, for this one, and this is a really important part of what he shows in that work as well, is learning how to read documents, online documentation for particular whatever it is. And in this case, here's the link to the Bootstrap documentation. So what I want you to look through and try to find things that are not covered already in what you've started with Bootstrap. So, like, as an example, he showed us how to do an accordion, how to do containers. The grid is so big, you could probably, because there's so much content there. What I would do, and this is what I would recommend, is you kind of focus on forms and components. I think those are good. So what you're going to do here is you're going to find something to implement. Okay. So let's go back to what you need to do. So once you find something, right, and you all need to find something different, this is actually the benefit of posting early, is you don't have to look through everybody's posts to do this. So the work you will do for this hands-on will be in your GitHub IO site. And in there, you'll create a new folder called Week 5 HO for hands-on. And inside of that folder, create your index file and then include the Bootstrap CDN. Now, I will have talked about CDN references in the attendance, so hopefully you already have that context, and you've already done it in the lecture. So you can just go and grab that reference there. Okay, so each student needs to select a different topic. I already said that. I would suggest, forms and components, and then provide us a link to your output and write something about write something about this item that you created. Now, what I want you to do is not just, start with the base content here and then modify it, make it something that is more customized to you and maybe one of the ideas you have around how you might use this in the context of a website. So what I will do is when I grade this work, right, you're going to give us a link to your GitHub IO. You're going to tell us which item you built. So you're going to tell us from here. Matter of fact, let's add one more thing here, is provide us a link to the thing you created. Okay. That will help us then go look at the item that you created. So you'll provide two links here. Let me just kind of give you that idea. So how would I grab this? Let's say I was going to do check boxes, and let's say I was going to do undetermined. Yeah, here's one, right? So there's actually a here that gives me a link. So that actual is a link to that indeterminate. Let's say in this case, it is a checkbox. Now, in some of these, you'll also need to include the JavaScript, which he showed in the lecture. So if for some reason it's not working, you'll need to also include the JavaScript for that. Pseudocast. Oh yeah, so this is actually not in need of the JavaScript. This is just saying that it's set manually. Okay. So when you're doing a post, you could say thing, let's call it Bootstrap item I created there, and then my output. Okay. And here is where you would give your GitHub IO. Yeah. So for me, it would be Rio Waller, GitHub IO /week 5 HO. Okay. So that, because you're creating an index file, you don't have to specify the index file. I know that's probably big, so you can't really see it. You should be able to see it. Okay. I'll copy and paste it. But I also want to show you in here, right? So then you would paste that. Notice, by the way, and this is something that Canvas does, and it should work. If for some reason it doesn't, make sure that is a link so that when somebody goes to look at it, you have it. And then what you'd want to do is write something about like why you chose this one, something about it, 150 words, no replies required. So you're just taking what you've learned and kind of taking it to a next step. Okay, so let's go look. I'm not going to save this one. Let's go look at the last item in this one. So the last item in this first item of week 5 is semantic versioning. So semantic versioning is something that, because you are starting in the pathway to do not it, you may or may not become a software developer, but a web developer, any kind of developer needs to understand versions, okay, of something. So there's a video here to give you that, basic understanding of what semantic versioning is. And you've all seen it, but you probably just don't know what it means because nobody ever explained it. But anytime you look at a version of software, like for me, my Android, like is 13 dot something, is each of those dots mean something. Of course, the major one, which is the version itself, but then there are changes that are, and he breaks this down. This video does a really good job here of breaking down and helping you understand what each of them mean. Okay, so here's what you want to do is, once you understand conceptually what this is, then go find something you use all the time and give us its version and explain it to the best of your ability in its semantic version context, right? So give us at least, you don't have to give it a lot here, right? Give us the version, and then talk about, its semantic version context, just a little bit. No cutting and pasting. Again, write it in your own words and then reply to two folks. And actually, I almost think I want to change this and put no replies here and then put replies on this one, because the one before it where we're building something, I think makes more sense. So I think that's what I'm going to do now that I've just thought about it. Okay, hope this helps. Talk to you later.